fine. There, yeah, okay, it is working. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. We are returning to the war in Iran. We're returning to Israel, Lebanon. I thought it would be important to have a bit of a deeper dive on the Israeli-Lebanon front because the two sides seem to have agreed some kind of peace deal, or at least agreement, but it seems like the Israeli military is hell-bent, the government is hell-bent on undoing all that. So could that destabilize the entire situation in Lebanon? And could that therefore destabilize the whole situation with the Iranians and US? We're joined by ex-CIA analyst and expert Larry Johnson, who's basically just, I feel like you co-run the channel with me at this point, Larry.
Yeah, it's good. Next thing you know, we'll be picking out furniture together.
Oh, well, that's always a favorite of mine, isn't it? What are you sitting on at the moment? You're inside or you're outside? Because you're on
outside. Yeah, outside. It's a little cloudy and gray today. Very Londonish.
Yeah, very much so. Very Londonish. But right now, so we have seen some interesting developments in Washington. Lebanon and the Israelis sort of made some kind of deal. They apparently made some kind of deal, but that's obviously dependent on Hezbollah disarming. But that's not going to happen because Hezbollah feels that they need to protect themselves against the IDF. So take me through what you're thinking about there.
Oh, that was just they were touting, hey, this is a great accomplishment. It's a meaningless agreement. You got to have Hezbollah at the table if you're going to make that agreement. You got to get Hezbollah saying, okay, yeah, we'll agree to abandon the territory south of the Litani River, but they're not going to do that. They weren't involved with the discussion. And Lebanon doesn't have the military force capable of removing Hezbollah. And for that matter, neither does Israel. So, this was, I call it just a meaningless exercise. People get some experience with negotiations, doing international diplomacy. But it will dissuade Israel from bombing Beirut, but they're already under the threat from Iran that if they do that, Iran will, bomb, hit northern Israel with a slew of missiles. So this is, the ground war. The ground war will continue in the south. And
it's just when was. But bluntly put, I've asked this to quite a few people on the show and channel at this point.
You're breaking up there, my friend.
Like those efforts, the Israeli government's efforts. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you keep fading in and out there. Keep going.
Wow. No, what I'm saying is that is this not? I'm buying a new laptop, everyone, by the way, because this one just can't handle the CPU. Is terrible. But anyway, so if you can hear me, Larry, what I'm saying is,
yeah, I hear you.
American. Okay, well, you can't see me. The Americans have said that Trump called Netanyahu effing crazy, right? He's called him crazy because he wanted to continue attacking Beirut directly, and they've basically been doing that anyway. In the outset to our conversation, I think 2 days ago, one of the things I wanted to ask you before we got that news about the strikes on Beirut, on Bahrain and Kuwait, was simply, what is Netanyahu's game here? Does he really think he can get away, do you think, with escalating in Lebanon and still keep Trump on side? Because it seems to me that he doesn't even care about that relationship at this point.
Well, I think we've got way too much focus on Bibi. Yeah, he is the current leader. He's calling the shots at present. But once he is out of the picture, do you think Israeli policy is going to change? I don't. Because even what Bibi's doing reflects a broader consensus, or at least a majority consensus of opinion in Israel. So instead of making it about a personality, it ought to be more about compelling and forcing Israel to behave. At least, it sounds paternalistic from the U.S. standpoint, but That's the reality. U.S. needs to restrict aid, withhold aid until Israel does what we tell them to do with respect to behaving and dealing with the Palestinians. But that's not going to happen. So the odds are that this war will grind on until such time as if Israel crosses the line and bombs Beirut, Iran will then hit them with a major missile barrage. And that will then put the war back on. Israel will try to retaliate, and Iran will retaliate. At that point, the United States will try to stay out of it.
Well, they can't, because the Israelis seem to be hell bent on bringing them in, right? I think that the Israelis at one point even just said they want the Americans to just strike in parts of Lebanon, right? It's just insane. The extent to which that they have this warmongering intention. What I was trying to ask you before the technical difficulties a moment ago was simply, this is all about a greater Israeli project, right? I think that the two main characters I often reference, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, they haven't even remotely been subtle about their intentions of forcibly acquiring territory and ethnically cleansing the land, or forcibly relocating the people that inhabit not just Gaza, but as we said, in parts of southern Lebanon, southwest Syria. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, this has been going on now for let's see, the first one was 75, so 51 years, and it's deja vu all over again. And it was the Hezbollah came into existence because of the Israelis' first invasion into Lebanon. They went all the way to Beirut back in 1982. And the reason we got them out of Beirut in 1982 was because the United States sent troops that we do peacekeeping and inadvertently got itself directly involved. What we're looking at here is nobody's learning anything from history. They keep repeating it. The one thing that is not going to change is Hezbollah is not going to disappear. Hezbollah is not going to be defeated. And at some point, Israel's going to have to cut a deal with them.
I'm on mute.
Still there?
Yeah, I am. The StreamYard's very glitchy these days. I think maybe I need to update it, but it just put me on mute. One of the updates we had yesterday, which I thought was really interesting, actually, just to bring into this point, was the vote. Now, I know it's largely symbolic, but it was a vote of 215 to 208, if I remember correctly. 2 or 3 Republicans voted alongside the Democrats.
Four.
To limit Trump's power in the war. Is this largely irrelevant to you?
It's meaningless. It doesn't. All it is it's a symbolic gesture at this point, until such time as the Senate takes it up, and then if the Senate passes it, and then both houses agree upon a bill, pass it and send it to Trump, then it has some teeth. But Trump can veto it and is likely to sustain a veto. So it's just, but it's important from the standpoint that it shows that at least they've been able to scrape together a small majority that oppose the war.
A small majority, though, that. So what? It's only he's a lame duck president after the midterms. Then that seems to be the only.
Well, candidly, he's a lame duck president now, by all meanings of the word. He's not able to get anything through Congress. You look at he's been unable to get the Department of Homeland Security funded. So he's been unable to get funding for immigration, customs enforcement. So he's now a living demonstration of being a lame duck.
I've never not found that expression relative so amusing. To be honest, I've never fully understood it. Why ducks are the analogy used here? What is it about ducks that are so specific? But
Well, if they're lame, the origin, I think, if the ducks are known for being able to waddle around, that's part of their charm. If you're lame, you're not waddling.
wow, that's even more tragic than I thought it was. Also, I think it's rather offensive because I think ducks are quite sweet animals, and so to make me think of them in reference to Trump is a bit harsh, to be honest with you. Yeah, I don't know.
That's funny.
Well, it is, isn't it? I don't know.
Yeah,
I think I used to call him the orangutan, but orangutans. I went to Borneo once in Indonesia about 10, 12 years ago, and they're incredible creatures. And so it's actually really rude, I think, to be to call them, to call him an orangutan. Let's put it that way. But yeah, he said the other thing that I've noted from Trump is just how many ways he's able to spin the same statement around. He said that the peace deal is nearly there and progress being made is what he said. But does he not have a limitation on how much he can get away with trying to say the same thing 16 different ways, Larry? Because to
you
me,
mean Trump?
Yeah, because he just it's
Well,
so embarrassing for his reputation, right?
he's I think past the point of embarrassment. Lost the sense of shame. The great expression in Spanish for that, sin vergüenza. Without shame.
Okay.
So
that's a good one.
Now, while we're talking about it, I just looked up lame duck. So that was a term originally referred to a stockbroker or speculator, and this was back in the 18th century. That someone who waddled out of the alley. Alley is where trading took place. So someone who couldn't meet their financial obligations. Then it was first used in the U.S. in the 1860s in congressional elections. So it's just means you're ineffective. You can't get anything done.
Oh, right. So it's an American term. I thought it came from somewhere. A lot of terms are British, but okay, interesting.
No, you're right. The original lame duck came out of Britain. The London Stock Exchange, to be precise.
Oh, okay. Tell me more. What do you know about that then?
They're saying that it was it would refer to a stockbroker or speculator who couldn't pay their debts after a bad investment. So they would, quote, waddle out of the alley, I guess Exchange Alley, which later became the London Stock Exchange. That's where the trading took place. So someone, there was some cheeky lad, I'm sure, back then who came up with the expression called labeling someone a lame duck. But then, migrated overseas to American politics.
There's been a lot of expressions, I think, in the past that were sort of used, like the nothing burger. That's not something I'd ever really heard of before I moved to the United States. To say that sort of it's been a bit of a nothing burger, and the Brits would never say burger. We would just say there's fuck all happening or something.
Yeah.
We'd probably be a lot more blunt about it. But I'm curious, actually. So one of the things that Marco Rubio has said recently, and I wanted to go into a little bit of that on the segue, because from what I've seen, Larry, and maybe you've seen this as well, Vance has not done great. His reputation hasn't been greatly improved because of his stance or unwillingness to sort of just follow through with his support for the war. Seems like he's one of the wiser ones. But Rubio has come out as sort of more favorable, at least amongst Trump himself and those who love to speculate about the future of the MAGA movement. Right?
Yeah.
No, go
Well,
on.
sure. He's beloved of the neocons. J.D. Vance is anti-neocon, he's been the leading voice trying to keep us out of war. and he's been sidelined. And Marco Rubio is the consummate ass kisser that works his way up the ladder in Washington. Don't rock the boat, kiss the boss's ass, and don't create a flap.
But do you think he's more of a traditional Republican in that way? He strikes me as much more of the establishment DC type before Trump.
No, that's what I'm saying. Rubio, yes, very much part of the the deep state class.
Yeah, no, he's a type. He said, I'm just going to read you something that he said earlier. So he said he was talking with his Kuwaiti counterpart, Foreign Minister Sheikh Gerard. Oh my God, this is his full name, Gerard Jaber Al Ahmad Al Shabar, who's the Foreign Minister of Kuwait. He reiterated the commitment of the US to Kuwait's security to ensure that Iran never acquires a nuclear weapon. Goes back to our good debate the other night, and a restoration of freedom of navigation through the Strait of Hormuz. What I find interesting about this, though, is that they didn't really do much the first time that Iran was striking. And from what I understand, whatever happened, if you remember, we were talking incessantly, remember, about Karg Island. Nothing came out of that. And this whole idea that maybe Marines or some special forces would sort of launch in boats or equivalent from Karg Island, from Kuwait, to Karg Island. I think you and I were having that conversation a few weeks back.
Those are scenarios made up by people who play Call of Duty who have no actual understanding of logistics and capabilities. They're completely. And that's why the talk about us disappeared, because they are impractical and of such a level of risk that the losses that would be incurred far outset any. There is no strategic military objective to be gained.
No, there isn't. And but I think more what I'm getting at, excuse me, specifically, is that this is, I think, a very big reveal of how much the US doesn't really see these as allies in the traditional sense, right? It sees them more as just useful gateways. That it's a utility. They see Kuwait as a utility, as a launching base, as a launching pad for operations against their regional systemic challenge, etc. Right? They haven't come to the aid of Kuwait, but they find it useful enough that they're obviously going to make these statements. But then when Iran actually launches strikes against the international airport and a lot of infrastructure, they don't really do much to sort of help out, do they?
Yeah, well, it's fascinating. There's been an AI drone strike on the Kuwait International Airport because it shows it in broad daylight, and that's not when the attack took place. It was the early morning hours. It was dark. So what hit the Kuwait International Airport was another failed PAC-3 missile by the Patriot battery. So look, the last time the United States went to bat for Kuwait was in 1990, following the Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, which was made possible in large measure because of us, the United States, where we told Saddam we didn't, if he had a problem with Kuwait stealing his oil and was going to go deal with it, and we said we didn't care what he did, essentially. So then when he acts, all of a sudden we decide to care. And I'm convinced that there were some financial assets in Kuwait that were tied up with the Bush administration, who made the decision to go in.
Well, I was going to ask you a little bit about the Gulf War, actually, because I've always been very fascinated by it. I wasn't around at the time, but reading the history, not to reveal my age, but I was very fascinated about how it demonstrated a truly global set of countries coming together against Saddam Hussein. But
and why, you got to ask yourself, why was Saddam Hussein considered a threat and an enemy?
No, that's what I'm getting at, which is that you have to look deeper than just what is covered in Western media or traditional outlets and narrative. framing,
Mhm.
which is that there's clearly more to it in terms of the personal motivations of the Bush administration, much like with was it Terriega, the leader of Panama, right? If I'm remembering correctly, in
Yeah,
1989.
Noriega, Manuel.
Noriega, sorry, what did I say? Terriega? Noriega. Noriega. Too many names to remember. But yeah, Noriega. And that there was clearly personal motivations in that as well.
Well, look, in each of these cases, I misquoted Henry Kissinger. Kissinger's precise quote was, "It's dangerous to be an enemy of the United States, but it's lethal to be its friend." And in other words, being a friend of the United States can get you into more trouble. Saddam Hussein, from 1980 until the Gulf War, the 1990 invasion of Kuwait, he was a friend of the United States. And the United States provided him with financial aid, provided him with the precursor chemicals that were required to make chemical weapons, provided him with biological weapons, biological agents that could be weaponized, and we provided him with intelligence. So he'd know Iran's weaknesses, where he could attack, what targets would be best hit. He had that relationship, and I guarantee you, he was meeting regularly with the U.S. ambassador over that period of time, and having regular contact with CIA up until 1986, when because of Iran-Contra, when Saddam found out about that, he tossed the CIA out, refused to have any more dealings with the CIA, and insisted he'd only deal with the U.S. military, which he did. And a friend of mine, unfortunately deceased, Walter Patrick Lang, who had served as a colonel in Vietnam, or he'd served in Vietnam, and he later became a full bird colonel. And then later, after that, became the head of the Middle East division at the Defense Intelligence Agency. So he had carried the intelligence to Saddam. So you got to step back and ask yourself, they've got a 11-year relationship with this guy. Why do we all of a sudden get so pissed off at him that we want to organize a global war?
Yeah, no,
it makes no sense. And then to proceed 13 years later to argue that he had weapons of mass destruction, and not, I didn't know what I know now. I wish I had known then what I know now, because I would have hollered bullshit. Because whatever chemical, biological weapons he had it because of us, not because of his own nefarious instincts, because of us. He developed them and used them with us helping him. It's disgusting, our complicity in this kind of stuff. Same with Manuel Noriega. Oh my God, he was a drug trafficker. Yeah, we helped him until he became no longer useful.
The thing that never ceases to amaze me, Larry, is just how much you'll find the US, especially, although the Soviets did it a fair amount, of being on one side and then completely flipping a few years later. I mean, this happened with obviously the Afghan war and the Mujahideen and everything. But what I really found interesting, and you'll know about this because of what you were doing at the time, I guess, but I think it was the Israelis were paranoid that Saddam was paranoid that the Americans were supporting Iranians. And it turned out they were kind of passive.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what I said. That's why, Saddam got pissed off at it. Now, when I say carrying intelligence, do you understand what I mean when I use that phrase?
Elaborate for me.
Okay, so you've got human intelligence, you've got signals intelligence, intercepted communications. You've got ELINT, electronic intelligence, such as like what frequency does an air defense radar operate on? such as that, things like that. You've got the imagery, overhead photographs of locations of things, and where they're how to access a target. Those are the basic categories of intelligence that were carried and given to Iraq, so it would be able to plan offensive operations. It would know where to hit Iran at its weakest points, etc. So hand carrying intelligence is not just taking them a copy of your daily blog. So read this. No, it's much deeper than that.
I remember reading much about the idea of 7 types of intelligence, right? Different types of intelligence. But I think emotional and critical thinking are particularly lacking amongst people often. But Larry, let's bring in a little bit more news. There's a little bit of a development here. Trump said that he thinks he can just get the nuclear enriched uranium if he wants, right? This whole idea is of the deal with Iran, a underpinning cornerstone of it is that Iran will not have nuclear enriched uranium, that it can't get a bomb. We had our discussion on that a couple of days ago. But Iran has around 440, 450 kilograms? Around 60%?
That's been one of the estimates. I don't think we really know. What we do know what happened as a result. So when I reported last week that the Pakistanis had received a brief from Iran that certainly implied that they had developed a nuclear device, at least one, that they were willing to detonate to send a demonstration to the West. The White House believed that report. We know that now thanks to Robert Barnes. Robert was Trump's former attorney, and Robert has still got friends and connections inside the Trump administration. And I'd asked him to check it out, see what if he had any corroboration of that, and he came back and said absolutely, which is why we've seen such a dramatic change in how Donald Trump talks about Iran over the last 5 days. So he's no longer insulting Iran and no longer threatening them with the extinction of their civilization. Now, the Pakistanis have been playing a very central role, and we received additional information today from Pakistan that they believe they're on the threshold of an agreement between the United States and Iran that will ultimately dispose of Iran's nuclear weapons. But in the process, Iran will get most of its demands of what it's been asking for. And the Pakistani source believes that they are very, very close to having Trump and Pezeshkian meet in Islamabad to sign what's going to be called the Islamabad Accord. Now, there's still a lot of problems with this, where this can all go wrong. But the Pakistanis seem confident about it. And that's why, I emphasize that when making these reports, I'm not claiming that, quote, I know. All I'm claiming is there is a source who has access to that information and proven access. And so when he's saying it, you report, this is what he's saying about that. Is it true or not? Now, part of the reason I think the Trump administration put a high degree of confidence in this is they had interest. They were intercepting, listening in on the conversation between Pezeshkian and Sharif, the prime minister of Pakistan. Then when the foreign minister intervened and spoke with Marco Rubio, the same information was delivered. So now they had a confirmation from 2 different sources that, yes, this is what the Iranians are saying. So that's where, as soon as I saw Trump's repeated efforts to downplay and not attack Iran, there's been a definite shift in strategy. How long it will last, I don't know.
Don't worry, I understand the distinction between what you're directly saying and what you've been told by others, and therefore it's difficult to fully confirm. But what I think is interesting is that Trump has always had the desire almost to publicly state how much this won't be like the Obama deal, i.e., like the JCPOA. But as it's gotten closer,
Well, which is a ridiculous statement. You realize it, don't you?
well, I was going to elaborate on that.
Have you ever read the JCPOA?
More precisely than you'd think, yes.
Okay, you've read it. So was that a loose agreement with sloppily written?
No, but it's one of the most comprehensive joint declarations towards a commitment of something like nuclear power ever written. It's a very thorough document.
Thank you very much. That is exactly right. Gold star for you, brother Curzin. Yeah, you get these politicians that pretend that it was just some flaky document and not well thought out. No, it was extremely well thought out. Now, could you criticize it that, they put a 10-year limit on it? Yeah, that's, you could make that case. But the false claim that, Trump's just giving him back money. Well, it was their goddamn money. It was their money. We stole it. So usually when you steal something, you need to return it. And, the United States is big on theft and not big on returning what it's stolen. So Trump trashing the JCPOA was done purely to satisfy the Zionists in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, as I say, so I was going to elaborate on that simply, which is that, the JCPOA came about because of a few different reasons, right? But ultimately, it was probably the pinnacle of Obama. Whether, again, you liked Obama or not as a character, the JCPOA was arguably the pinnacle of his foreign policy, with one of the most complicated and difficult groups to manage, at least from an American perspective, right? For themselves, it's obviously challenging trying to deal with the Americans, but ultimately it was done. And you had not just the Americans and the allies like Britain and France, but you had the Chinese and the Russians on board, which is a seriously impressive bit of diplomatic safeguard to get them all to sign on to this.
Not just signed on, but also supporting sanctions against Iran. So they were something with the Chinese and Russians are loath to allow, that a foreign power can come in and dictate what you can buy, who can deal with you, etc. And then they both subsequently have been major targets of U.S. sanctions, which, has inspired them now to move on to build an alternative financial system.
Yeah, we can get into that in a bit, perhaps. But I just, on this point, because, as I say, Trump has been hammering away how much that the JCPOA was the worst deal ever. It's one of the first things he ever said when he came into office, wasn't it? It was one of the most public things he was talking about Obama when he first took over, and that he would destroy it and remove it and pull out of it, etc., etc. But because he did that, that's all obviously triggered the Iranians to revert to what they were doing. And ultimately, the more that this war has gone on, Larry, I'm sure you would agree with this, right? Trump has tried to avoid being... He's critical of it, but he's tried to avoid directly referencing it to me, because the problem is everything that he's talking about, all these details of a potential deal or relationship with Iran over the enriched uranium, is just a JCPOA, but a worse version. It's just a watered down.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I agree with you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No, it's terrible. No. It's just terrible.
Yeah, he will come out when all is said and done, with less, a less rigorous agreement. Now, this all goes back though to the illusion, or maybe it's the delusion, that this is all about preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. That is the concern of the West, that they have no other issues or concern with Iran. Well, that's just a lie. Their concern with Iran is that Iran exists, that it's an Islamic state that lives according to not Sharia law, but they live according to an Islamic code that is not radical. It's not fanatical. It's actually pretty damn moderate, and carries with it the additional irony that, like the West is fond of talking about Judeo-Christian values, but what Christians in the West share more in common with Iran. Iran considers Jesus a prophet. The Jews do not. Iran considers Mother Mary a holy woman. In fact, there is a subway station in Tehran that's dedicated to Mary, Mother of Jesus. Think about that.
Thinking. I don't know what to make of that, to be honest.
It would be one thing if Israel would never consider making a monument to Mary, the mother of Jesus, because in the Talmud, at least in albeit written hundreds of years ago, referred to her as a whore, as a prostitute. Well, and I've heard some try to say, well, you can't put much stock in that because that was written 600 years ago. I go, wait a second. You're putting a lot of stock in the Old Testament, and that was written supposedly 2,000 years ago or 2,500 years ago. So, pick your argument and your logic, please.
Yeah, I suppose. On this, actually, one thing that I thought was quite hilarious, actually, is that Trump said he would be honored to meet Mujtaba, the new supreme leader, right? He said, I don't want to meet, but if I did meet, I'd be honored to meet him. This guy just seems to have a fascination with meeting.
Yeah. What did he just say? I think on both sides of the argument. Plus, maybe he wants to meet him because he's homosexual, and Trump has a secret of fantasy. Sorry,
Larry, you are full of surprises. That is exactly the imagery I wanted right now.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
No,
but but remember, Trump said it. I mean, he was accusing him of being homosexual.
Lovely.
So
yeah. Well, he also added, well, no, but that's not true, Larry, because he also said, Trump said that he would be, quote, respectful if he were to meet him. Right.
That's now. That's now. That wasn't 4 weeks ago.
Okay. Well, tomorrow he'll then say he's a piece of POS, and we're back.
No, actually, I think Trump he's made a turn on this because they're desperately trying to get a deal. He needs a deal to sell. Oh yes. Oh
no, it's so terrible, Larry. I haven't seen a more embarrassing effort at diplomacy sort of since 1938, Neville Chamberlain and Hitler in Munich conference. I just think it's so pathetic, the pandering almost Trump has been doing, the sort of desperation to try to win appeasement with his domestic base. I actually was kind of curious for your thoughts on that, because there was a pretty big poll that was released earlier. I saw quite interesting just how low the support is amongst Americans now for this war. It said I think that less than 25% or something said that this should be good for the US.
It makes you wonder what those 25% are to say such a ridiculous thing. But
I'm kind of curious though when it comes to the distinction here, because just let me find the actual So when these kinds of polls are doing, we expect obviously divergence on the bipartisan alignment, but 88% of Democratic voters say the war has been bad, but only a third of Republicans shared that view. I would have thought it was a lot higher for the GOP, because a lot of the GOP are disillusioned Trump supporters who thought that this guy was coming into office to end the wars, not get stuck in them. He literally ran on for an ending forever war platform. It's kind of confusing, though.
Republicans are a female country artist. We're Tammy Wynette. They Stand By Your Man. Song about a guy who'd been, a bit of unfaithful and sort of a scoundrel, but stand by your man. They're standing by their man, sort of. at least some of the Republicans.
Well, some of the, I just wonder whether or not that's the average voter intellect of different parts of the US. I mean, the UK is not much better, to mind you, but it's pretty terrible right now. What else was there that I saw that I wanted to grab your take on? There was, okay, I'm actually being interested in all this time in Qatar. I had a very interesting conversation with the former defense attaché from the Qatari government yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, he's someone I met a couple of times, and as I say, the show is about trying to be diverse in opinions.
Right.
But I think it's quite interesting to get his take, because Qatar has really tried to position itself as, some people call it, the Switzerland of the Middle East. This sort of neutral ground, which somehow, yeah, I personally don't see it myself, but that's what they call it. What's your thoughts on that? What's your thoughts on the third players, the third parties? You mentioned Pakistan.
Yeah. Well, apart from the fact that Qatar has no mountains, no snow, is a flat piece of brown desert.
No fondue.
Other than that, yeah, it reminds me of Switzerland. Oh yeah, no lakes either. No pristine glacial lakes adorning the landscape. Qatar has they've had a very interesting position. One, they've been host to the largest U.S. military base in the region, and one of the largest in the world. At Al Udeid, just the physical size of it, big place. There is a TGIF Fridays. Thank God it's Fridays restaurant on the base. So there was.
Oh God!
There was also a Burger King trailer. Like a food truck, but it was a Burger King food truck.
Well, that's Larry, if I may, but you'll definitely find that in Switzerland. So
the Qatar found itself, 9 years ago now, in the crosshairs of Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates.
Yeah.
These Gulf Arabs, and I always like to use movie references, like lots of movies or have. They are like the Mean Girls, okay? Constantly turning on each other. Yeah, so 9 years ago, it was Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates were lined up against Qatar because Qatar's relationships with Turkey and alleged relationships and support for either Hamas or Hezbollah. Well, it was Hamas, but that they were doing what they were doing with Hamas at the behest of the West. They didn't just come up with that on their own. So, and in the midst of that, like US, Saudis tried to impose an embargo and tried to hurt them economically. And the one country that came to the aid of Qatar then, right?
No,
give you a hit. It begins with an I.
Really? Israel.
And it ends with an N.
Oh, Iran. Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons why today Qatar will talk to Iran. That they basically do have friendly feelings towards the Iranians, or did, because at a time when everybody else was telling them to fuck off, Iran came in and said, "No, we'll help you." They provided humanitarian assistance and others. Okay, so now jump ahead to 2 years ago, and the Saudis are no longer pissing on Qatar. Instead, they're threatening the United Arab Emirates. So United Arab Emirates and the Saudis are talking about going to war with one another. That's why I say it's like Mean Girls. They just keep, 1 week they're best friends, the next week they're worst enemies. And it usually involves nothing. Sound and fury that signifies nothing.
Yeah, the Qataris have been a very interesting group to watch, especially in the context of the war in Gaza, but also the shadow war in the run-up to all of these actual events. The Saudis and the Iranians have had that effective shadow war for a long time. And to me, it indicated the direction of the balance of power, right? Because on the one hand, you've had the Qataris, who were essentially ostracized from the rest of the Middle East. The Turks took a sort of, Erdogan specifically took a sort of gave an olive branch, because also Erdogan has largely been sidelined by a lot of the Middle East. I think Erdogan pushed this whole idea of neo-Ottomanism in the 2010s, and that was not really something that was much interested. He wanted to sort of bring together a lot of the Middle East, and it wasn't really, no one was keen. I think another example you can use is when it was first being discussed about what would happen the day after tomorrow, of the war with Israel and Hamas. Turkey was keen to put itself forward as sort of one of the key players as a peacekeeping force, and a lot of Egypt was like, no chance, we're not having that. So it's interesting, the Turkish relationship with Qatar, and then also with Pakistan and Saudi Arabia in that sort of dynamic. Because on the other hand, now with the divergence, the rift between the Emiratis and the Saudis, the Israelis and Emiratis are very close. And then because Pakistan's been quite involved in the Middle East, Larry, I think that has sort of by extension brought India in a little bit, because whatever Pakistan's doing, Delhi has to be like watching. So you've got this weird expanded set of groups, these two sort of packs growing between different entities, trying to counterbalance against one another. I'm kind of curious if you've seen that, or you think that's not really happening.
Well, and don't forget China. So the reason, the main reason Pakistan is doing what Pakistan is doing is because of China. Now, and Pakistan occupies a unique position because, the current head of the military and the whole ouster of Imran Khan was basically manufactured by the United States. And so the succeeding governments took felt some obligation or loyalty to the United States. But now they also have Pakistan as a direct interest with Saudi Arabia, providing it with security and military assistance. And they have a good relationship with Iran because of the shared border and both groups fighting against the Baluchis. And when I comment that Iran and Pakistan are fighting against the Baluchis, then I get nasty letters from the Baluchi community saying, why are you dissing us? It's just, folks, I'm just dealing with the reality of the situation. I'm not taking a position that, we should have Baluchi independence or we should not have, I'm sort of let these other countries battle this out. I learned long ago that even if I had, when I had a friend, I was friends with a couple, they decided to get divorced, and I made a stupid error of expressing my opinion about how difficult one of the partners was, and then they both got mad at me. So I learned, you know what, I'm going to mind my own damn business. I'll be friendly and supportive with people. There's certain opinions I will keep to myself because, they don't need to hear my opinion. It's not going to change what they do. And I think that should be actually a pretty good formulation for how foreign policy should be conducted. That say we want to have cordial relations with North Korea, with Iran, with all the so-called bad actors. We can have cordial relations because that's how Russia does it. Russia doesn't sit down and say, oh yeah, here's a list of beliefs of things that we believe that you got to believe in, or else we're not going to like you. No, it's just if you start from a premise of you have your national interests, we have our national interests, and let's see where our national interests combine so that we can work together. And if we've got some friction points, we'll try to avoid those or work around them. But instead, that's not how the United States conducts foreign policy. We make it like a catechism for the Catholic Church. You gotta submit to this profession of faith, the list of I believe in. And then if you don't act in accordance with those beliefs, we punish you.
I always enjoy our conversations, Larry. You have a very unique way of bringing in some interesting analogies, good storytelling. I like it. I like the particular sort of reference to you have opinions, but people aren't going to change even if you share them. So might as well not ruffle
Yeah.
those feathers, so to speak. I think that's quite a good analogy. The problem is that I'll use Africa as an example because I've got a lot of experience down there. But what I've noted is that sort of, a lot of countries really like China because they're very transactional. So they'll just come in, they'll say, look, we're going to take care of these big infrastructure projects. We just want to give you these, I don't know, it's a dam, it's a road, it's a highway, it's a railway, etc. With the United States or the West, IMF, World Bank and things, of which I worked for, to be transparent, there's a lot of stipulations, right? You have to reach certain quotas. You have to adhere to their demands over sort of governance model, right? You have to be democratic. You have to have elections. You have to have rule of law, all these elements, which personally I think might be nice. I'm more of a fan of democracy, if I'm honest, but that's a dictation to the host nation that you have to behave like this way. And a lot of nations might be like, look, we want and need investment, but we don't want to be dictated about how we should govern ourselves. I lived in Ghana for over a year, and they passed just last week a bill against LGBT laws, right? And Ghana is meant to be one of the more liberal, politically stable countries in Africa. So, is the West going to tell Ghana that they can't do that, and they're going to cut funding for aid projects or whatever it is?
Yes, they will. That's where we take it upon ourselves to interfere. But it's like Africa in particular. We talk about Africa. Which Africa are we talking about? We're talking about Egypt, Algiers, Morocco.
The North African,
North Arab. Are we talking about Kenya, Tanzania? The sort of the British parts. Egypt was under British control at one point. We're talking about the Sahel. Niger, Mali,
Francophone,
and then we get down. So there is, I would call Africa a Western construct, where we like to pretend that it's one thing, and it is, as you know, quite different, quite varied.
It's always entertaining to ask people, where are you going on holiday? They're like, oh, I'm visiting London, Paris, Spain, Rome, Ibiza. And I'm also going to Africa. Okay, so we've shifted from cities to nation states to an entire continent. Just sort of the same. There's a great meme somewhere on the internet, and it shows you sort of what a lot of Americans, no offense, think the world consists of. And it's not even England, it's just London. And it's not even France, it's just Paris. Spain is the whole thing for some reason. Italy's just Rome, or maybe Venice, or something. So when you talk about Africa, it's just like, it's all the same, right?
Well, I tell you, most Americans, I'd say a majority of Americans, don't even know what the capital of their state is.
Well, I mean, some of your states have some weird name capitals, I'm going to be honest.
Well, but it's the center of government for that state. You think they'd have some passing interest in it, and they don't. They have no idea. So,
I've been to 20 states. I think that's more than a lot of Americans can say, actually.
50-50.
50-50. All right. All right, Larry. Well, to wrap up, let's double down on this. Trump says that the US can seize Iran's enriched uranium immediately. How does that work then? And what do you think we expect to see in the next few days? You said things have ramped down now. Are we basically just in this? Are we just in a Cold War this sort of way, and nothing's really going to change?
U.S. is not going to be able to do anything to coerce Iran to give up its enriched uranium. If there is a deal on that, it'll be brokered probably by the Chinese and Russians, who the Iranians trust. But they do not trust the United States. That trust has been destroyed. And the United States has a lot of work, which candidly I don't think it's willing to do, to try to restore such trust. But if Trump walks away with an agreement that he can show everybody that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, he'll be a happy camper.
That just makes me think of Trump being at a happy farm or something. Sort of, he's on a happy camp and he goes on his day release trips, and he's very happy. He feels better. All right, Larry. Well, I mean, to end on this great conversation, we'll obviously, hopefully, get together again over the weekend, maybe, if there's a major development. But what should we be watching? What would you focus our eyes on? Is it Lebanon and Israel? Is that the ticking time bomb, or is it Trump's?
It's still the Persian Gulf. Also, keep an eye on Russia's offensive is picking up momentum, and Ukraine is in bigger trouble each passing day. So, but what I'd watch, let's watch what Trump says. Now, I always say watch what he does, not what he says, but watch what he says right now. If we see a shift in his rhetoric, if he goes from being conciliatory towards Iran as he is right now to being back to his threats and obnoxious statements. If he does that, then I think we're moving back where the United States is likely to re-engage Iran on militarily.
All right. Well, thanks, Larry. No, I mean, I think he's already released what he says. I think he's just out of things to say. He's regurgitating the same thing. You don't really know what's going to come out of his mouth one day from the next, but he's clearly desperate for a deal, but also stuck in a bind, and he doesn't know the best way forward. So he's trying to reassure that the deal is imminent, but clearly it's not, because the Iranians haven't caved, and he's trying to figure out how he can get rid of this situation without looking at it as though he's caved completely, which is inevitably what will happen. But yeah, Larry, as always, a big pleasure. Everyone watching, do of course check out Sonar 21. I think I've got it right by now. Sonar 21, yes, Larry's work, Larry's website, and of course subscribe if you haven't already. We've got a lot of exciting things coming up, and we'll see you all over the weekend. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Peter. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.